If you live in the United States and you're a working professional and you haven't heard of LinkedIn, it's really something you've got to get to know, especially if you're looking for a new job. I'm Anne Marie Segal. I've been an executive coach and resume writer for 10 years. Prior to that, I was an attorney for 15 years. This video is geared towards the thousands of people in the United States in spring 2025 who have been laid off. If you've been in federal government, LinkedIn may not have been an important part of your day to day or even something that you're familiar with. Same for some folks at nonprofits. LinkedIn is not for everyone. It's not something that's needed for every single role. However, if you are in the type of field, industry, and role that folks like you are often on LinkedIn, it's extremely important that you're there. The anecdotal evidence is that 9 out of 10 recruiters and 7 out of 10 hiring managers, when they get your resume or otherwise are um, know about your candidacy, that they go straight to LinkedIn to see if you have a profile and to see what's on it. So it's extremely important. I talk in this series, Making Your Comeback, about resumes. I have 2 videos on resumes and then other videos on other topics in terms of landing your next role. This one is focused on LinkedIn. Obviously, I can't cover everything about LinkedIn, but I'd like to give you some highlights. So the first thing is your picture's extremely important. This is how people see you, first impression. You want to be relaxed. You want to be professional. You want to essentially embody what they would encounter when you first meet them or when you are in an important meeting or discussion in that role. How would you come across? That's the first impression to give on LinkedIn. It might mean going and getting a new professional photograph, not one like me now with different things in the background, but very neutral. This is my office space, so this is how I record. But in terms of LinkedIn, I mean, you could go and look at my profile as an example. You want something that's you don't want things in the background competing with people seeing you and responding to you directly. Um, it's not like the moving picture that I am now. In addition, your headline is extremely important. Keywords are very important. I talk about keywords a bit in the resume video. Um, Keywords play an important role on LinkedIn because the machine learning, the algorithm, by that I just mean the way that the program that runs LinkedIn essentially finds you is by matching you up to something else. That's how they make connections. It could be because someone's in your network, or it could be because someone is doing a search for a certain type of individual and they're using keywords or key concepts, and you match that. So, keywords are helpful in your headline. If there's a title of a role that you're looking for example, to put that in your headline, if that actually makes sense, if that's a role that you've held in the past, that would be a really helpful thing. Um, I'm not a big fan of telling the whole world that you're looking for something if it makes you look desperate, if it's done in a way that's not reserved, because then you're just going to get a bunch of responses that are really not relevant to you. And you may devalue yourself in the process. You may not look like you're going to exercise judgment. You're just going to take whatever role shows up. And it's important not to come across that way on LinkedIn. It's important to present your best self. Sometimes I talk about this like a blind date. You know, you don't want to walk in and I'll date anybody, you know. Same idea with the job search. You want them to want you. You want to show that you have value, and you know your value and you own it. And so that's part of that dynamic on LinkedIn. Your summary is also very important. To use the opportunity to get more keywords in, to use the opportunity to tell your story, for people to understand who you are as a candidate. You can create a clear, compelling, and convincing narrative about yourself. Once you understand your target audience, what they're looking for, and how to present that. And sometimes you have multiple target audiences. Excuse me. I sometimes call this like having a major and a minor. It's like in college, you would think about it that way. You write towards your target audience that you're more likely to be a fit for, but then also mention some information about you in the alternative, and make a composite to talk about yourself. You want to avoid large blocks of text or anything, frankly, that's difficult to read. Remember, most people are reading this on their phones or other devices. So bullet points are sometimes helpful, but shorter paragraphs at least, and everything very clear and obviously no typos. And I say obviously, but it's not obvious to everyone because I see this all the time and it could knock you out as a candidate. So you want to do everything you can to avoid that. How do you avoid that if you're not good at proofreading yourself? And even if you are, send your profile to a number of different people. Just send the URL, the link, and ask them, what do you see when you read through my profile? What's missing? What could I improve on? And if they're astute, they will be able to give you helpful feedback because they're removed from the situation. They're able to more more than you are probably able to tell you what someone from a third party perspective would see, someone who may not be familiar with you and your background. Speaking of the LinkedIn profile URL, it's good to have a clean URL. And by that, I mean linkedin.com/in/ and then your name, maybe some additional characters if like say you're an attorney ESQ or you're a doctor MD or something, if in fact you're going to continue in that role later. If your name by itself is so common that you can't get that name, but not this string of numbers that LinkedIn assigns to you. How do you find and change your LinkedIn profile URL? That leads me to another point I wanted to make about LinkedIn, which is LinkedIn help is actually really useful. Not all help functions are, but you can go into a search engine or go onto LinkedIn and search for, find my LinkedIn profile URL or change my LinkedIn profile URL or add a section on LinkedIn. How do I? All of these things, anything that you want to be able to do on LinkedIn that's not intuitive, you can probably find it because you can find it either in LinkedIn help or someone has covered it, um, who's a LinkedIn expert and can help you with that. The next thing I wanted to talk about briefly was the experience section, which so the summary is giving you an overview of you as a candidate and maybe some highlights. And then within each role, you want to be talking about what you did in that role. And again, thinking towards your target audience, what are the transferable skills? What's useful for them to know about what I did in this role? So you're coming to the present and thinking about the future and then looking back at your roles and saying, based on where I want to go, how do I describe what I did? The last thing I want to say is if you don't have a role currently, there's going to be the question of, so what do I put as my current role? Or do I just not have a current role? Or do I keep the old role alive? Do I put an end date? The question does not have one simple answer, but I will give you some general guidelines. I wouldn't, and unless you've been told, which I don't think is the case for most, although it is the case for some people who've been laid off in the federal government recently. If you haven't been told that you are still employed for a certain amount of time, um, I wouldn't just keep acting as though you continue to be in that role. In fact, the one positive thing, if I can call it that, that comes out of this momentum of so many people being laid off is that everyone knows about it. So there's no shame in it. There's no, oh my gosh, what are people going to think of me that I lost my job? You may feel that internally, but that is not the sentiment. So having an end date is not a negative. in that sense. In fact, it helps explain your story. And in another video, I go through the RFL, the reason for leaving your role, and how to talk about that and think about that. In terms of should you have something as what I might call a placeholder, even though you don't have a current role, put something there just so it looks like you have a current role. Often people do that, yes. And the way that they do it is they take a title that describes them, they come up with some name of the organization, or they kind of generally describe the type of roles that they're looking for in short order, maybe nonprofit organizations or something like that. And then they give a little summary, which should not be repetitive from what's above or below, describing them as a candidate, maybe saying there that they're open to the right roles, open to new roles when, the right fit idea. Again, not being desperate and, oh my God, I need a job. Please hire me, anyone. Because that's probably not where you're going to come out when you really think about it. Um, so being a little circumspect in your entire job search is a helpful thing. And to show on LinkedIn that you are um, open, but not completely open is also a good thing. So putting something there so that when a recruiter, for example, says, I'm looking for people with current roles, which you might say they shouldn't do, and I could agree with you, but sometimes they do, you will pop up in that search. After you've been out of a role for a while, maybe you'll do some consulting work or something else. You'll pick up some kind of a side gig while you're looking for your main gig for your real job. You could include that as well, as long as you make sure that it doesn't look like you've somehow landed in that role and you're not still looking for a full-time role. So again, you have a network of people around you. If your network is not savvy in LinkedIn, maybe you can find people who are to help you through some of these decisions and nuances about how to present your profile. But overall, the idea is you're inviting someone to your page. It's a page about you. You want to express really what you offer to the world. We would call it your value proposition. You want it to be clean and crisp and compelling so that it will bring you to that next stage, which is potentially the interview or the role. Best of luck in your job search.